The silence in our home had become a physical presence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of two people comfortable in their shared space. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket woven from unspoken resentments and forgotten affections. We were roommates, orbiting each other in a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance. I would busy myself in the kitchen, he would retreat to his study, and the space between us would stretch into a vast, uncrossable canyon. The love was still there, I told myself, buried under layers of routine, stress, and the slow, insidious erosion of connection. We were drowning, but so slowly that neither of us had the energy to scream for help. I remember one particular evening, sitting across from him at the dinner table we had so excitedly picked out years ago. The clinking of our forks against the ceramic plates was the only sound. I looked at this man, the man I had chosen to build a life with, and I felt a profound sense of loneliness. The word therapy hung in the air between us on more than one occasion. Friends suggested it, articles recommended it, and a small part of me wondered if it was the only answer. We talked about it, or rather, we danced around the subject. The idea of inviting a stranger into the most intimate, broken parts of our relationship felt clinical and foreign. He, in particular, was resistant. He saw it as an admission of ultimate failure, a formal process that would label our problems and put them under a microscope. Ultimately, we made a pact. We would give ourselves one chance to fix this on our own. If our attempt failed, we would reconsider the professional route. This decision was empowering. It put the responsibility squarely back in our hands. I proposed what I called the 3-hour contract, a single evening dedicated entirely to us, with a set of rules we would both agree to beforehand. We sat down together for the first time in months to plan something collaborative that wasn't a vacation or a budget. Rule 1. No phones, no TV, no laptops, no distractions for 3 solid hours. The world outside our living room would cease to exist. Setting the stage was crucial. We decided to buy a new bottle of wine, the good stuff we saved for celebrations. We would get some of our favorite snacks, light a few candles, and put on a soft, instrumental playlist. The goal was to create a sanctuary, a neutral territory that was physically in our home, but emotionally separate from the tension. The first hour was excruciatingly awkward. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the new bottle of wine and a platter of cheese between us, like a carefully negotiated buffer zone. The silence we were trying to break felt even louder in this staged environment. He asked about a favorite memory from our early days. My mind went completely blank at first, but then I closed my eyes and a memory finally surfaced. The time we got caught in a sudden thunderstorm on our way home from a movie. We were soaked to the bone, but instead of rushing inside, we stood on the sidewalk under a broken awning, laughing hysterically as the city rushed by. I described the smell of the rain on the hot pavement and the feeling of his hand in mine, a small, warm anchor in the chaos. After a long pause, he said quietly, "I remember that. You had that blue dress on." The detail, so small and specific, was a tiny spark. He had been there with me, not just in the story, but in the memory itself. As we moved into the second hour, the wine had softened the sharp edges of our anxiety. I took a leap and asked, "When did you start to feel a distance between us?" I braced myself for the answer, expecting him to point to a specific fight or a particular failing on my part. He was quiet for a long time. "It wasn't one thing," he began. "It was a slow fade. I think it started when I began to feel like I couldn't bring you my problems. My stress from work felt like a burden I shouldn't add to your plate, so I just stopped talking about it." His confession was so different from what I had expected. It wasn't about me, it was about him. I saw him not as the distant partner who was withdrawing from me, but as a man who was struggling alone, trying to protect me in a misguided way that ended up hurting us both. It was my turn to be vulnerable. I admitted that his silence had made me feel insecure and unloved. We weren't pointing fingers. We were describing our own separate, lonely experiences of the same slow-motion car crash. The turning point was not a dramatic, tear-filled embrace. It was a moment of profound, almost unnerving stillness. After my confession about feeling walled off, he looked at me directly for the first time all evening. His eyes, which had been distant and guarded for so long, were now clear and filled with a sorrow that mirrored my own. He then reached out his hand, not to touch me, but just placed it on the cushion between us, palm up. It was an invitation, a question without words. I looked at his hand, then at his face, and I slowly placed my own hand in his.
The simple act of touch was electric. It was a current of recognition, of forgiveness, of a shared humanity that we had both forgotten. "I miss you," he whispered, and his voice cracked on the last word. "I miss you too," I whispered back.
And in that exchange, the entire dynamic shifted. We were no longer two opposing sides. We were a team again, facing the same problem, the distance that had grown between us. The goal was no longer to prove who was right, but to simply close that distance. That night, we didn't fall into bed in a fit of renewed passion. It was something quieter, more profound. When we went to bed, we lay facing each other, our hands still loosely clasped between us. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel an invisible wall running down the middle of the mattress. Waking up the next morning felt like opening my eyes in a different reality. The air in the apartment felt lighter, cleaner. He made coffee, and as he handed me a mug, he smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Good morning," he said, and the simple words were imbued with a new meaning. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd had so many silent, painful meals, and we just talked. The conversation flowed effortlessly, a forgotten language we were suddenly fluent in again. The immediate change was a palpable kindness. We were gentler with each other. The lasting impact of that one night has been far more profound than I could have imagined. It wasn't just a temporary fix. It became a new chapter in our story. The 3-hour contract taught us a new language of communication, one built on intentional listening and vulnerable sharing. We learned that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the bridge back to each other. Our relationship feels less fragile because we've seen it at its worst and know we have the tools to pull it back from the brink. We refer to it now simply as the night. It's a cornerstone in our shared history. If you feel a creeping silence in your own relationship, if you feel more like roommates than soulmates, I want to offer you this encouragement. You have the power to change it. You don't necessarily need an expert to mediate your love. Sometimes the most powerful solutions are the ones you create yourselves. All you need is a quiet space, a willingness to be honest, and a few hours dedicated solely to the project of us. It saved our love, not by magic, but by the hard, beautiful work of intentional reconnection. The goal isn't to solve every problem in one night. The goal is to reestablish a single thread of connection. From that one thread, you can begin to reweave the tapestry of your love. It is brave, difficult work, but the potential reward is immeasurable. The return of the person you love and the return of the person you are when you are with them. Like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed this content.